InfoTecarios Podcast, el mundo de la información en constante evolución.
Infotecarios, ya estamos por acá con este grito tradicional de inicio de sesión, de inicio del podcast. Feliz año a todos, gracias por escucharnos. Un gustazo estar de nuevo con todos ustedes retomando un nuevo año, una nueva temporada de podcast. Y bueno, el día de hoy tendremos un nuevo episodio en inglés, así que haremos el switch. So yeah, we are here. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your preference. We are happy to be here. This is New Year. So yeah, we are part of this amazing podcast. That's good. We had an interesting conversation today. Yeah, but previously we're going to start with the presentation. Hello, Juan. How are you doing? Mr. Juantífico.
Hello, everyone. Happy New Year. Happy to be here. Your friend Juantífico, reporting from Chihuahua, Mexico. And welcome to another edition of InfoTecarios Podcast International, your information therapy this weekend. And this first show of 2025, we have a stellar guest. We have Lucy Roper here. Hi, Lucy. How are you doing?
Hello. Yeah, I'm not sure about stellar guest, but thank you very much for inviting me along today. Happy New Year, everyone. My name's Lucy Roper. I'm a solo academic librarian in the UK. I work at the University College of Estate Management, which is a online specialist university providing training for undergrad and postgrad students studying the built environment.
Great. And you said you are a solo librarian. The expression is pretty self-explanatory, but could you tell us what does it mean and what does it imply to be a solo librarian?
Okay, yes. Well, around about 12 years ago, I was working at the university and we used to provide correspondence courses. So students would receive their study papers, a couple of textbooks, and work through their activities. But when we were going for taught degree awarding powers, they wanted to provide an online library to support all the students and staff. And I was recruited as a digital resource manager and solo librarian to create an online library and later a physical library from scratch on my own, but with the help, obviously, of staff within the organisation. So for the last 12 years, I've been building our library to what it is today.
How many patrons do you have, an average?
Well, students-wise, we have around 4,000 students that we cater for. We have around 300 members of staff. All our students are online, as I said earlier, so they have access to a virtual learning environment where all our databases, ebooks, e-journals sit to support them in their studies.
It's quite a lot of users. How do you cope?
Well, I do have some help. For example, we have an online portal called Student Central where students can log queries. So I do provide training to staff who deal with the calls that come in or emails that come in. Hopefully that some of the queries they might be able to answer, where to log in, where to access guidance. I do frequently ask questions as well. If they aren't able to answer it, they can assign it to me and I can log in. I also have a library at UCEM email address, so students can contact me via that route as well. Obviously, I do things like the beginning of term. I do library inductions. I do one-to-one tutorials. With online, we can do a lot of videos. So I do a lot of training tutorials on how do you navigate the library, how do you undertake searches, things like that. I probably have around 30 inquiries a day, something like that from students. But obviously, beginning of term, close to assignments, then I might get more than that to deal with. But we always try, if I get common queries, we have things like announcement forums on our virtual learning environment where if you find there's a common query coming up, you can put in an announcement and that generates an email to all the students. So sometimes you can nip certain things in the bud early on based on what you receive. But normally I'm fine. But as I say, there are tutors that help. We have academic support tutors as well. So whilst I might be a solo librarian, there are other people who can help with queries relating to library and resources that we have.
All right, so you have to prepare a lot of resources for students to find help quickly, like the videos you said, and that involves some other competences, right, for a librarian to have. Did you find that in your training? Did you learn some things as you were working in this way?
Oh, yes, definitely. I mean, before I worked as a librarian, I've been a librarian 25 years now. I actually came from sport and leisure. I was studying for PE sports science at university because I'm a swimmer when I'm not working. And when I graduated, it was hard to find a job that allowed me to do training before and after work and racing at weekends. So I worked for a professional body initially in a library, and that was a physical library. But over time, obviously, I've built up my digital literacy skills as the advancements in technology have occurred. So when I moved to University College of Estate Management and created the online library, it was a steep learning curve to get familiar with a lot of these online resources and tools to help us. So search skills, advanced search, obviously more recently AI and how we can embrace that. So I am learning things all the time. But one of the things with becoming a librarian, obviously I wasn't qualified when the job came up at University College of Estate Management. So what they said to me was, we know you've got a lot of experience, but you're not a qualified librarian. Would you be willing, when I applied for the job, to earn slightly less, but become qualified? And if there are areas where you need additional skills like digital literacy, then I used the money to invest in training. And then once I became qualified, I then got the salary that had been originally advertised. So it was a win-win for me because I found a job that the e-library is open 24/7, even if I'm working more a 9-to-5 role. I do a lot more than that, actually. But I've been able to pick up skills through my professional body, SILIP, the Library and Information Service that we have in association in UK. And with online, I've done things like copyright, e-copyright, digital resources, and digital literacy skills. So it's something that I'm working on and improving all the time because there's a lot to learn out there.
Yeah, definitely. It's a lot. But, thinking on that, what are some of the biggest challenges you face working as a solo librarian? I think that probably you had big challenges over there. What it was the most impressive that you have learned and faced it, and what do you think about it?
Yes, this was part of the reason why I wrote the book. Obviously, as I say, I've been a librarian 25 years. I've been a solo librarian for about half of those years. And some of the challenges, you can feel a bit isolated at times. So things like forming networks, coming to podcasts like this is great because you can hear from other people and what they do and see if there's things that you can integrate in your own library. Also form contacts and share experiences. Some of the challenges, as always, is you have a set budget and there's a lot of lecturers that want the latest resources and feel that you should have everything, and your budget only goes so far, and subscriptions can cost a lot of money. So that can be a struggle at times. But again, you can have a look at do benchmarking and research and see what your competitors, what resources do they have? Are there areas where you can build your collection of open access? There's demand-driven access and acquisition. So there's things that you pick up over time that you can integrate. Other challenges, as I say, technology and time. But sometimes there are some things technology-wise that can save you time. So for things like copyright, we integrated in the UK, we've got the Copyright Licensing Agency, and they have a really good digital content store where you can upload scans, but also you can use scans from other university as long as you can prove that you own a copy of the material. You can share material with other universities that have better equipment. So like with scanning, sometimes you can have an issue where you can scan an item, but it comes up as an image and you can't see optical characters. So if you're wanting to use a screen reader, for example, it doesn't pick out all the words. But with some universities, they have really good scanners that can pull out all the right material. So in the case of some of these systems, you can share with other people and use their scan, but you just fill in what you have under your license. So there's some good projects like that you learn from, as I say, networking, being part of online forums where you can share your challenges and the way you've resolved them, if you like.
Yeah, I think that for everyone, the problem is the budget, as usual.
Yes.
Yeah, and infrastructure, that's very important too in these cases, I think.
Yeah, no, definitely.
And it's very interesting that, project or initiative that if you have a physical copy of the material, you can share it. That reminded me immediately about the issue that the Internet Archive had in the US.
Yeah.
How would you say that worked in the UK and it doesn't in the US?
Well, I think with digital preservation, cybersecurity, all of these areas are again another concern and another area that people need to look at in detail. You know, things that we've been doing, things like multi-factor authentication. Yes, sometimes students think that they'd rather not have so many clicks, but the reason why you have to go through some of these steps is to try and make material as secure as you can, but also look at ways where you can have material saved in repositories that other people can log into and obtain. So you might have a scan within your own repository, but if something happens there, but because you've got a backup of the catalogue of what you own, then by working with other universities to use their scan material that you can then put into your repository means you can help each other out and collaborate a bit more and provide more accessible material. But digital preservation is something that we're worrying about all the time. You know, what happens if something were to go down and you can lose material that is essential for your teaching and learning. As I say, we used to have correspondence courses, so all of our study papers are electronic. You've still got your lecturers who are the subject experts at the end of the day. But if one of these big databases were to go down, British Library had a cyber attack which went down for a year and still not fully back up and running. So there are things in the background that you've just got to be wary of and communicate regularly with your key contacts if there's information that you can help each other out with. And with lockdown as well, this was another thing that I found challenging. Well, I felt a bit guilty, if I'm honest, where a lot of university libraries were closing and they were having to transition to an online delivery model. And I felt, well, I was in a stronger position because we're fully online. And so there was a project with the Joint Information Services Committee that we came together and shared brilliant open access resources that could be used across all universities that was freely available. Some subscription services did offer up services, but you had to be a bit careful there, because once lockdown finished and you started going back to normal ways of working, you had to be a bit careful that some of these subscription services would say, I'm afraid we're going to start charging you now. And if you're not careful, students got to love and know these resources. And if you can't afford to now pay for them, then you had to be a bit mindful of that. So I avoided that. I only tapped into open access and open educational resources in order that I knew that after lockdown finished, those resources would still be readily available for our students to access.
Right. And then the main topic we would like to discuss is, of course, your book, the Solo Librarian book. What motivated you to write about it?
Well, you mentioned earlier when I introduced myself that Professor David Baker, who you both know, and is my mentor. What happened was, within my professional body in the UK, CILIP, the Library Information Association, they have a number of qualifications, vocational qualifications, certification, fully chartered, and then the highest is fellowship. And for your fellowship, you have to provide evidence of substantial achievements and significant contributions to the profession. And they recommend that you get a mentor. And I contacted David, and David was very keen and enthusiastic, as you both know. He had a look at my CV and he said, you need to get your name out there. You need to get some work published, sit on networks. And when it came to getting some work published, I had published work before, but nothing on the scale of writing a book. And David said, what about a book chapter maybe to begin with, or a case study, or a thought-provoking piece? And he mentioned benchmarking. So I did a book for his benchmarking libraries initially. And then once I'd got that published, and as you know, because you're both published authors, it's quite nice when you finally get that book in your hand with your name mentioned in the chapter. All the hard work feels worthwhile. And also with benchmarking, in my case, it's something I do all the time in my job, looking at what others are doing, benchmarking what we do against our competitors. And so I found it a bit easier writing that, because it was some pieces of research and work that I was doing anyway. And then they said, we quite like the way you write. You're quite practical. We think you've got a book in you. So they threw up a few ideas, and I thought, oh, this is going to be a lot of work. And then the idea of the Solo Librarian came up, and I thought, actually, this is something I think I could do, because I've got quite a lot of experience now. And when you're writing a book, as you guys know, you have to put a book proposal in. You have to say who your competitors are. It has to be reviewed by subject experts. And when I was looking at the field, I realized that there's a lot of books on librarianship, but very few from the perspective of a solo librarian. There's literally a handful. They're quite outdated now. Quite a few of them are American. There aren't any UK-based current vocational practical books. And so I thought, this is a gap in the market. Maybe I can share my experiences to help those that have to juggle multiple tasks on their own. And what I really was keen to do is, rather than just a book, I wanted to provide a companion website and an online toolkit, which you get when you buy the book. And with the online materials, what I wanted to do is I did a yearly timeline, and this is how I structured the book, which followed the year in the life of myself as a solo librarian. And as key tasks occurred throughout the year, that's what helped shape the chapters and and the time-saving templates, as I call them. So, for example, when I was doing things like copyright reporting, I would talk about what is copyright. I would show a form that I use when I'm seeking copyright permission. What information do I need to report every year? And I would make the templates available that people can download, drop their logo in, tailor to their working practice, and hope that if people found themselves newly soloed or a solo librarian, it wouldn't be as daunting, because there's a raft of information to support people throughout their time. So I had things like copyright cover sheets, I had financial planning, accessibility, with a range of, as I say, material that people could click on, download and tailor to their own working practice. So that's how the book was pulled together, really.
I was actually thinking that without searching, my guess would be that there are not so many materials about that. And it's quite unique that you present such a comprehensive and practical help for anyone in this in a similar situation where they have to be a solo librarian, right? Could you walk us through the table of contents of the book to present it? Just provide some comments on the chapters. Let's see. So we have the website here. And down below, you will find the table of contents. Let's see. You have to expand this to see the chapters.
Yeah.
All right.
So just quickly going through, as you can see, I kicked off with an introduction as what Solo Librarian is all about. I then moved on to reviewing the literature of what's already out there. And as I say, it is quite limited. There is a lot of books on different aspects of librarianship in quite a lot of detail, but very few from the perspective of a solo librarian who has to juggle multiple tasks. So then moving on with chapter 3, I looked at library and information services as a whole. And with regards to capturing all the aspects of library provision, within SILIP again, they have a professional knowledge and skills base, which covers a whole raft of aspects of library provision. So records and archiving, financial planning, cataloguing and classification. And I used that to make sure I did cover all aspects. Then I've got my top tips for successful solo librarianship. And these were just things that I highlighted as key areas that I feel people should consider. Things like good time and financial management, understanding your users, having a clear vision and mission statement for your library, setting long and short-term goals and ensuring outcomes can be measured, developing a comprehensive collection strategy. I talked about mental health and well-being and how important it is, because I do work long hours, but it's important to make sure you do have a break and make sure you think about health and well-being. Staying up to date with latest trends, how important CPD is and never stop learning, and I don't, and how important staying connected is. So these were my top tips, but I'll show you a bit later that I shared these with others to get their viewpoints as to whether they agreed with me, whether I missed anything out. So chapter 5 then looked at research and benchmarking. So I looked about when I first created my online library, I did quite a lot of research. Our competitors, what did they offer? What things did I need to consider with regards to the collections we subscribe to, what systems to have in place, how to address financial planning, what guidance to give to our staff and students, what library analytics I needed to consider to justify spend on certain areas. Chapter 6 then, this was an idea that David had. David and Dr. Lucy Ellis were editors for the book. David suggested I did a Delphi exercise, and again I thought, that sounds like a lot of work, but it was the best thing. 100%, he was right. It gave me a chance to talk to other solo librarians in the UK and abroad. I contacted the Commercial, Legal and Scientific Information Group. It's a special interest group made up of small and specialist libraries that also had solo librarians. I also contacted the Guild HE Librarian Network, which again is small and specialist libraries, and also the Association of British Theological and Philosophical Libraries, again made up of small and specialist libraries. And by sending out questions to them and getting their input, I learned so much. It was a brilliant exercise because you can learn so much from each other, and as well form networks of people that you can contact at a later date. So if you are feeling isolated, I always say being a librarian is a brilliant job. We're a really nice family around the world. We understand what each other are going through, and we're happy to share and help each other. And I found that a great deal. Access and identity management. So this looked at authentication, library development. So that area looked at embracing technology, areas that I wanted to build on our library. Accessibility is a big area, making sure that you address accessibility guidelines and make finding information as easiest as possible for your library users. Copyright is a big area for me. This was an area that I identified that I wanted to take on extra responsibility at the university, and it's something I'm passionate about. So I created an online workflow tracker to help work with our lecturers and our learning technologists more. So while they were developing their modules, copyright was embedded in that. So if they wanted to use material resources in their module development, copyright was questioned at that point, and they worked with me to make sure all of our material was available. Marketing and communications. I do a monthly newsletter, current awareness service. So I talked about the reason behind my marketing was I came from sport and leisure into the built environment. So I had to do quite a lot of work to get my head around the built environment. So I created a newsletter, which initially just went to our lecturers saying, I found these resources, these look really good. And we sort of worked, vice versa. I fed in, I wanted their endorsements. But actually it grew so big that it goes to students, subject librarians around the country and world. Actually, I've got some foreign subject librarians that sign up to the newsletter. So it goes to about 10,000 people now every month. It has sections on research, statistics, current news, organisational news, information governance, useful online resources, which, as I say, it's about 100 pages long. I get a bit carried away, but it's something that I can put in the library. And we've got about 9 years worth of knowledge foundations. That's what it's called. But also it's a good way to communicate with your library users and contacts elsewhere. Then conclusion and looking forward. So that embraces good old AI and other advancements in technologies, and areas to consider progressing the book and also networking. So I've encouraged people that have read the book to come back, see if there's areas that I've missed out, things that they've found most useful, and areas that maybe they want me to develop in the future. But then the key areas really is all the appendices, and there are quite a few that support the book. So as I say, as I go through, my timeline kicks it off. So the timeline's really good because it captures what we do as librarians. I think a lot of people think we just tell people to be quiet and put books on shelves. And as you know, we do a lot more than that. So as I dropped in tasks, how many inquiries I have, when you get to the end of the year, whether it's calendar or academic, it's great for appraisals because people can see just how much you do, but it's great for time management in the future. You can see which months you need to focus on different things, what's coming up that you need to plan ahead for. So the timeline kicks off and I explain what mine is, but then I provide templates that people can download and use within their own working practice. I've got my top tips that I expand on. I've got job specification examples for different jobs and skills that people look for. Then carrying on down, the sections that make up my library. So I've just explained how I structured my library. So things like overview. We have Athens authentication as our access system, e-journals and e-book directories. We have industry sources for our built environment, our published material and our research repository, dissertation library, useful web links to e-resources, useful glossary of terms. I always finish off with, don't forget your librarian, and bring it round to, if you've got a query, you know where to go. So I just expand a bit more on how I structured my library to what it is today. Then I've got examples of library guidance and search skills, resource request form. So this is for acquisitions. So if a tutor wants a resource, as I say, sometimes one lecturer came to me and said, this is an amazing resource, but it costs, which I found out, it cost £500,000. Well, that's more than my budget. So we've got a resource request form that they have to fill in with a whole load of questions. How much does it cost? Can our overseas students access it? How's it going to be used? How many students are on your module? All those sorts of things. And actually, in some cases, a tutor knows the answer without even approaching me. But sometimes if they fill it in and it's only £100 for an online journal, then it makes my life a bit easier because they've done the background and they can just send it in. I can have a look. And again, it justifies spend because I can say, this lecturer has identified we need extra support for foreign students with maths and English. So they've suggested a few books that we need in the library. So it makes my life easier and it gives me all the information I need to be able to purchase the resource. Operational processes. So again, this is something I've highlighted with digital preservation covered, accessibility, data protection, those kind of key things to approach. Accessibility statement that we all need. So it's things to consider. And I've just, again, provided an example of what we have at UCEM. Intellectual property policy covering copyright, research ethics. Copyright a bit further down. So that is our request for permission. So if it's something outside our license, we've got a form that we send out. What needs to be included within copyright cover sheets. I created a flowchart for our lecturers of they want a resource and they literally follow through the flowchart. I found that really helped a lot of people with copyright and understanding it. The copyright reporting process, and again, I've shown manual process and also automated. Good old classification. So I've covered Dewey Decimal classification, which is what we have at UCM, but I have explained other classification systems as well. Tailor-made research reports. This is an idea I had where I curriculum map against modules. So I pull off one of our module descriptors. I do keyword searches in the library and provide suggestions to our lecturers. And I just call it a tailor-made research report. But I can do it for students as well. So if you've got a dissertation student, they will feed in what their dissertation's about. And I create a tailor-made report based on their subject area of interest. Reading list examples. Again, you know all of these things, but I just provide examples of what our system does. We've got an online discovery service where you can undertake searches and create reading lists. It's one of the reasons why I decided on the discovery service that we had, because it had a built-in library management system and reading list system all in one system. So when you are a solo librarian and have to provide a number of services, which is expected for a library service, some of these smaller systems work better for you if they can achieve a number of tasks. So I've just gone through that. Marketing and promotion examples. So I've talked about information blogs, current awareness services, banners to go on your virtual learning environment to remind people of key resources. Library developments. I've got a Padlet we use quite a lot, an online free software system where you can invite people to come in and suggest areas that could be developed in the library. And again, I've just shown ones that I've used in meetings, in student tutorials, where you provide a link and allow people to feed in ideas on how you can improve what you offer. Data retention. So this is data protection now. So I've got a schedule that I designed. I did do data protection at university for GDPR. So I just talk about how important it is to know what data you hold, when things need to be deleted by, and have an understanding of what material you have saved on various computer systems. Research ethics, which is something, again, you guys will be well rehearsed in when it comes to publishing work. So talking about making sure you get consent and approvals and checklists. Getting there, as you can see, there's a lot of appendices. Key organisations. I've done this for UK and international organisations that I found really helped me. And I did some QR codes as well. So if people had a mobile, they could just, or a mobile device, scan all the QR codes for copyright, library, world catalogue, various things that people could just scan and set up as bookshelves or bookmarks online so they could get. And what was quite nice, the feedback from people who have purchased the book, and some sadly became newly soloed after COVID, and they were really nervous. All of a sudden they were in charge of everything. And they said what they found useful was one day they literally just did that. They got my book, downloaded all the toolkit, put their logos in, set up all the bookmarks, and they felt straight away that they were kind of organized, and it just gave them a bit of peace of mind that they hadn't forgotten anything and they could start to structure things a bit better. And that was really nice to hear, because that's what the kind of idea behind the book was all about, really. Useful glossary of terms which support any books, and then obviously bibliography and further reading on libraries, solo librarianship and aspects of librarianship. So I know there's a lot there, but the as I say, the main thing was I wanted to share my experience and hopefully give some useful time-saving tips and templates that people could make good use of within their organization.
That's really comprehensive and impressive material you have there. When you were preparing the book, well, if you are in the position of being a solo librarian, that means that you have to take over all library functions. But when you were preparing the book, how did you ensure that you covered everything? And conversely, what did you leave out or had to leave out for any reason?
Okay, good question. As I say, when I was thinking about the idea, and as I say, I decided to use my timeline as the kind of framework. I just thought I'm going to kick off with this timeline and follow the year in the life to try and capture as much as I can. And the other thing was the professional knowledge and skills base that CILIP provides. And if any of the listeners or anyone wants any further information, I'll leave my email address. So give me a shout if you want me to cover anything. But what's great about the professional knowledge and skills base is that it covers things. I've just got them here to make sure I don't miss anything out. But things like records management, customer services, research and benchmarking, financial management, strategy and planning, organizing knowledge, acquisitions, accessibility, digital literacy, advocacy, leadership, and information governance and compliance. And there's a really useful kind of wheel graphic which breaks all these things down. And with the professional knowledge and skills base, it's like an online tool. And if you're going through professional registration, you have to look at all of these and say, what areas do you have a lot of knowledge on? Are there areas you need more training on? Are there gaps that you got no idea, and you need and you're sort of, you have like a scale of 1 to 4, and you highlight at what stage you are in your career. But what's great about this was I thought I need to make sure I cover all these areas, but also when I was doing my fellowship, the areas that I wanted to improve on was research. So hence writing a book helped me to learn about research ethics, copyright, research and benchmarking skills. I also, copyright was an area that I took on because I was doing a lot of copyright in the library anyway. And when a member of our staff left who oversaw copyright, I saw an opportunity for me to progress within the organisation and take on more responsibility. So I went to exec and said, could I take on overall responsibility of copyright? There's some training I need to do. So I did copyright basics, then digital copyright, and then copyright masterclasses, and progressed that way. But then it meant, yes, I had overall responsibility, but I could show when I did my fellowship and in the book how I progressed career-wise and built my personal and professional development up on an area that was of interest to me. So when I went through my timeline, I did the PKSB at the beginning. And as I did the book, I made sure that I covered all of these aspects within the chapters to make sure that I covered everything. So that's how I kind of pulled it all together. So as for, have I missed anything out? At the moment, I don't appear to. I was a bit worried. It was quite funny, actually, because the book took about 18 months to write. And then, as you know, with publishing, that took another year of going back and forth, formatting, structuring and everything. And I was paranoid about what if suddenly something came up and I thought, oh, no, I've missed that out. And for us in the UK, the copyright license changed. And I was quite relieved that the formatting and proofreading had taken quite a lot, because I suddenly thought, I've just talked about copyright licensing and now it's all out of date. But fortunately for me, I had a chance to update it and make sure it was current. But I also made sure that within the book, I did put something in about make sure you check the license that you have for your organization, because things will change over time, to try and give it a longer shelf life. I've explained, as of this date, this is what you need to be aware of. And these are the things you need to consider, but be mindful that you need to check anything when it comes to legal regulation, look at contracts, look at licensing, and make sure that you're adhering to that. So I was relieved at the time, but it was something that made you think you've got to be a bit careful when you're writing a book to cover accessibility, compliance, regulations, because law can change regularly. So I have to make sure that I've got a disclaimer and make sure that people are aware that they haven't got to follow what I say to the point, but make sure they go to their relevant contracts and make sure that they're adhering to that. So that was one area that I was very mindful of.
Great. Lucy, in Latin America, you will find that one of the most common criticisms or challenges that we observe in the library and information science field is that we usually complain that our libraries are understaffed and librarians are underqualified usually. And this is a very common complaint. Most of us usually claim it. And not to say that we have solo librarians, but sometimes even reference librarians, especially, of course, in academic libraries, tend to assume a similar situation like a solo librarian, because they handle everything but circulation and cataloging. Yeah. Right? Everything else is in the reference librarian side. But what I want to ask you is about when do you think it is good enough to have a solo librarian, and when would you say that work is too much for a single person?
Good question. As I say, sometimes people have commented, our exec, on what happens if something happens to Lucy. Hopefully nothing will, but you don't know what's around the corner. And secondly, what if I were to leave tomorrow or someone offered me an amazing job and I went cheerio to UCEM? Where's, who's going to take up? And I think sometimes, and this comes to advocacy and shouting about what an amazing job librarians actually do, because you get some people whose attitude is, we can get everything online now, why do we need librarians? And I always say to people that the skills that we offer on finding credible sources, the searching, understanding, I know my database is like the back of my hand, so someone needs something, quite often I can find it quicker than anyone else. And we quite often sometimes have a bit of a challenge. Someone will set us a task and who can find it, and guaranteed the librarian always wins. But as I say, from my perspective, there are other people within the organisation that do help me with queries relating to the library. So we do have our learning, teaching and enhancement team. So academic support tutors. So if a student does have to use a particular are struggling with referencing, that is a common thing that we have. I know that academic support tutors can help on that front. We have our online portal where we have a student engagement team who answer queries and can sometimes answer a library related query without it coming through to me at all. I have been asked to consider getting an apprenticeship so I can start training some other people up to help me if I'm not around, or as a replacement if I leave, or if we get more students and therefore the pressure on us is higher. With the timeline, this was a great task that I often recommend people do anyway, because I don't think people understand. Sometimes I think people think Lucy's always happy, she loves her job, therefore it must be easy. And I have to go, hang on a minute. I normally start work at about 7:30 in the morning. I can quite often still be working at 7:30 at night. I try not to let it impact my swimming training. So that is no, I've got to stop now. I need to go training. But I probably work longer hours than a lot of members of staff. I know some of our academics are like me and they work because they love their jobs and they're working long hours as well. But it is something that I think sometimes people don't realise. And we have to sometimes just remind people that some people say to me, my responses are too detailed to students. But when it comes to awards or feedback, guaranteed I get some really nice, lovely comments from students who appreciate the time and effort that I've put in to help them. And I love my job, so I want to show off the library. So if someone says to me, I've gone into the library and there's nothing on this topic, then I go, sorry, I don't believe that. Where are you looking? Because I've just done a search and I found 28 million items. So actually what you should be saying to me is, there's too much information out there and I need your help to refine it to a more manageable number and to tell me what is credible, what is what people are looking for. We still find a lot of students do a search in Google and they'll list as their 10 references that their lecturers asked them to do be the top 10 items on Google. We know that because we type it in and find exactly the same sources as they've done. And we're saying, no, you need to go into the library, look at academic scholarly titles and train them up on that area. And all of these elements require additional time and effort and work. The great thing with online, as I say, is I can do video tutorials and provide things, because our students are a bit different to a lot of universities in that a lot of our students work full time. And so they're actually studying in the evenings. And this is another reason why I work late sometimes, because they're not always going to ask you a question between 9 to 5. They're going to be studying and doing their work in the evenings. And if something goes wrong, we're not around. So I want to try and make sure that there is a video tutorial that they could watch at any time that suits them. That might just give them a few tips. They can pause it, try something out, pause something. yes, they can send an email to me and I'll answer it as soon as possible. But sometimes there can be a bit of a time delay if it's a Friday night and they've just sent me an email now, and I might not get round to replying to it until Monday. And that's something I'm always a bit mindful of. But one of the things that I'm quite excited about with AI is whether we can embrace artificial intelligence a little bit more, that can maybe summarize things and draw students' attention to something that they need to read in a bit more detail. So we're not saying that what AI models produce is good enough, and we don't want people to start putting their essays in and getting bots to do their work. But is there a way that an AI bot could say, someone's typed into this chat bot a question for the library, and these are some guidance documents or some really good journal articles that we think you should read on this topic area, and use it in a way that can save us a bit of time. And if none of this answers your question, then send an email to Lucy, the librarian, at this email address. So it's looking at ways that we can try and make better use of our skills and our time, but we still got to remind our decision makers that actually we need more staff than less. But that's very difficult at times, as you've said and alluded to, that when budgets have got to be cut, sadly, sometimes that can impact libraries, not so much in my position being solo, because if they get rid of me, what do they do then? So in a way, I'm in a slightly safer position, but there does come a point where people say, well, it's a single point of failure. And if Lucy were to go, what would we do then? And even though we might be able to get another amazing librarian in, they're not going to necessarily know the library as well as Lucy does. And so it's making sure you train people up so that it's a smooth transition. You can help each other out. But yeah, budgets sadly do impact libraries quite a lot, as we see all the time, but we need them more than ever. And even though there's a lot of information online, I think we need librarians and the skills they offer even more so now.
All right. So correct me if I'm wrong. So among the main takeaways that we can have from this conversation is that being a solo librarian doesn't necessarily mean that you are all by yourself. You will have to prepare some materials, for learning materials, and for frequently asked questions to complement your work, and for catering for these users that are seeking help outside of working hours, but also to find alternatives, to have some people support you in some of the tasks. And as you mentioned, AI can be also an opportunity, as you can train AI assistants to provide answers as you would, which will not necessarily cover all cases, but it might be a good solution for the students needing something outside working hours. Will you add something to that? Am I correct?
Yeah. No, I think that is. I would add the importance of networks as well. Groups like this, sharing expertise amongst the library community. I do sit on quite a few networks. So special interest groups, like there's academic library research groups, there's small and specialist library groups, and you will start to get that community of people and expertise where you can share ideas. Like I said, with the Delphi study, I have made so many friends who are solo librarians. I also got some case studies. We had a case study from the Philippines. We had a case study from Munich, as well as UK. And I'd love to build, as you know, with David, he's already asking me what's my next book and things like that. I would love to do maybe one day some case studies and expand case studies and have something worldwide, just because I think we can learn so much from each other, help each other, and, as I say, not feel alone. Know that there are people. We can do Zoom, we can do these podcasts and meet people all around the world, which is great. So when David mentioned this to me, I thought, it'd be lovely to meet some more people. I have listened to some of your other podcasts as well, but it's you can learn so much from each other. So don't be afraid to network as far afield as you can and talk to each other and share good working practice with each other.
Great. Thank you so much. Saul, will you have another question?
Yeah, well, thinking in the mental health that is mentioned in the book, but additionally, congratulations, Lucy. It's a very complete work. But thinking in the mental health, how do you manage that? I think that it's very important for all the librarians, all the people, I think. But you, like a solo librarian, how are you dealing with that? Are you thinking and be resilient, or are you have a special method or something to try to be comfortable with your mind? How do you manage that?
Yeah. Well, I think for us librarians, we're quite organized people and pretty good with time management, I think. I do talk a lot about mental health and well-being. I've always said to people, even if you're really busy, I always think it's good to get some fresh air at lunchtime and go for a walk if you can. Some of my best ideas have been when I've been out on my lunchtime walk. Just having that break from the phone, the emails, the computer, you can come up with some great ideas. I've got notes on my phone. I've got a pad by my bed. All these things, whatever works for you. Things like, as I say, and I remember one of your last questions, as always, on your podcast was what you do outside work. And as I've alluded to before, I competed for GB for 12 years in swimming. It's my great passion. I do open water and sea swimming. So I swim first thing in the morning all year round, even when it's icy. I'm outdoors swimming. I swim in the evenings as well. I also volunteer for search and rescue. So it's something I can't devote as much time as I'd love because I've only got so many hours in the day. But I think volunteering is very fulfilling, and you can do as little as much as you like. But I think having that break from the desk is important, and having some time out, however you find. I find sport and exercise, I find volunteering, I find spiritual health good for me as well, and community of friends. So there's some great, again, organisations which I put in the book that I found useful. I'm a mental health first aider at work, so it's always good to talk, check in on people, make sure they're okay, and if they want to talk, where you are. So there's some guidance there that I've highlighted that people can, even if they don't want to talk to you, they can click through, go to some resources that gives them some ideas on coping mechanisms, some advice that might help people just to take some time out and make sure you're okay.
Yeah, definitely. We need to think and more activities and personal activities and extra things that we need to do out of the library, out of the work, particularly. I'm thinking in your professional career, what could be something that is very rewarding, that's something that it's good for you, and think that it's very incredible part of being a solo librarian.
Yeah, well, as I say, even things like learning something new. As I say, I find going to library visits really good as well. Again, meeting people. If I come away with something like I'm doing my next step is to do a PhD and use some of this work and research. And I went to the university this week for my induction, and it was really nice going to the library induction and see how do they do things at Middlesex. Are there things there that I can bring? They had a mental health and well-being talk as well, and they covered all these areas about, you know, having a coffee and chat one morning with your colleagues, with someone else in the organization, buddying up with somebody, telling them about your job, finding out about their job, whatever works, just to say, to have that break. And if you can learn something new, I always love learning something new. So I literally came back with, I must put all those things that I heard in the induction in our fact sheet, because there's some areas there that I think will be really useful for our students. So it wasn't just I was benefiting from it, but I'm constantly thinking how I need to put this and improve my library all the time, because it's nice to see how it's evolved over these 12 years, really.
It's amazing. Thinking in the book, we have changes every day. Do you think that we're gonna have a second edition, something like that? What's the future? Because the technology it's going so fast. The world is changing every day.
Or a second volume, right?
Definitely. Second edition, second volume. What do you think?
Well, it did make me laugh when Juan was saying in the podcast for the encyclopedias, because I did watch that. I think you sent me the link, and I did watch that. And, David was already talking about the second edition of the encyclopedia. And I remember you saying that it's good to have some time. Yes, it's a lot of undertaking, and it's nice when something comes out, but you need some time to promote it, to gather some feedback, to find out, are there gaps? What worked well for you? If you've read the book, what did you like? What didn't you agree with? Because even with the top tips, what I did was, for one of the Delphi study questions was, I asked people to prioritize the list 1 to 10, just to see how people differed. And I've applied that to a few groups since. So I thought I might be able to do like a phase 2 of the Delphi and contact wider groups of people that I've met over the years and build on that. Case studies, as I say, is another thing I'd like to do. Like with the encyclopedia, because I did some contributions for special libraries and solo librarianship. But I do think there needs to be at least a certain amount of time. I don't know how long. I know David wants me to think about it already, but I think you need to have enough of a gap to, as I say, I think technology is going to move at a cracking pace. AI, I think, is going to move at a cracking pace. And I think whilst I covered it, I can see so much more happening in the next few years. So I kind of feel that I want to give the book enough time to get the feedback, so that if I do ever write a second edition, that it's different enough to show what I've learned over that period, to make sure it's got value for being a second edition, if that makes sense. But I think maybe a compendium of case studies might be more worthwhile to have as a kind of bundle. So you've got the book, and then you've got some case studies in Delphi to complement it, maybe.
And I don't know, probably something, a new area to discover. That could be another option. Not specifically thinking in a solo librarian, but probably something additional or a specific area that you want to write something or share something of your experience. That would be great too.
Yeah. No, definitely.
All right, Juan, I don't know if we have more questions. We crossed the hour.
We ran out of time, and actually Lucy herself tackled our final question. We couldn't surprise her with our usual final question. So I think we are done. If there's not anything else, would you like to add anything else, Lucy?
I can't, maybe I've probably done something wrong technology-wise, but I'm happy for you to share my email address. So you can either contact me on library@ucem.ac.uk or l.roper for Lucy Roper. So l.roper@ucm.ac.uk. So if there's anything I've covered that you want more details on, if you want to connect, just give me a shout. I'm on LinkedIn. Be lovely to hear from you. If there are students out there, then, librarianship, library science is a great profession. So all the best with your studies, and never stop learning and keep connected.
Great, thank you. And we will share your contact information in the description in the video, in all the platforms that this podcast is distributed. So thank you very much to you, Lucy, and for the audience watching. And even if you are watching it afterwards, we thank you for your attention as usual. And remember, give us a like and subscribe to InfoTecarios and share these episodes if you like them. Well, let's say, as our friend Tonio usually says, if you have a friend and you like this episode, share it with your friend. But if you didn't like this episode and you have an enemy, share it with your enemy. Perhaps something good will come out of it anyway. So it was a pleasure to be with you, and let us know if you want to continue having these episodes with our distinguished guests, English-speaking guests, so we can practice our English as well. So thank you very much for your attention, and turn to you, Saul.
Thank you, guys, and thank you, Lucy. It was a pleasure. We can finish this episode, and thank you for your time, for your preference, and we'll see you in the next episode. See you.
Thanks so much.
See you. Bye.